is Carol Holmes. I'm a co-chair of Grandmothers Act to Save the Planet, GASP, and have my co-chair here, Lorraine Green. And thank you for this opportunity to meet. Um, there's two groups here, representatives from two groups, GASP and Sustainable Milton. I think you'll recognize your fellow citizens there, constituents. I want to, before we get into the subject, I want to thank you for your public support on guaranteed livable income. This was a major initiative campaign for GASP, and we're still very active in it. And we think it was pretty courageous for our rookie MP to stand up, because there weren't that many of you. So we hope you're still going to be a voice for that. There's lots of discussion across Canada.
Well, there's still a lot of work to be done too. I'm sorry to jump in, but I don't think we're going to talk about guaranteed livable income or UBI for the duration of the call. So I'll take this opportunity just to, we've also got Bill 273. And that's a private member's bill for UBI. There's some technical differences between a guaranteed livable income and a UBI, and I know that you guys know, and I hope that everybody knows, that voting for it or passing a private member's bill like that isn't like a key or like a light switch. Like it's just, oh, there's going to be a UBI like in 2022. It'll take a long time, but it's something that's a worthy ambition, and something that's worth the work, and something that's worth the effort.
We agree. We agree. So we want you to stick with it. For today, what we want to do is I'll do a brief intro, and then we've got a bit of a slide presentation for you. And then we open up to questions. So I hope you're okay. And by the way, can we call you Adam?
I insist you call me nothing other than Adam, unless you have names that you want to call me. Unless you're mad at me for some reason, you can call me whatever name you want. But if you say Mr. Vancouver, then I'm going to get my dad on the phone.
All right. Okay. Well, we'll stick with Adam then.
Yeah.
All right. Every one of us, all of us here, are fighting the climate crisis. And you, Adam, you campaigned on it. And so you have the same basic concerns about us. Our emissions are increasing. We've missed every climate target. We only have 10 years. That's a very short time to avoid the worst of the impact of climate crisis. So we cheered out loud for the Accountability Act, because here was really a legislative move that really held government to account for failing to deliver on emissions reduction. But in reading the details, we were really concerned, and still are, and quite upset that the first target is 2030, because that's way, way too late. Prime Minister Trudeau had promised us 5 years, and we feel 5 years has got to be 2025. And legally targeting targets have to start now. Accountability has to start now, not waiting 20 years till 2030, when, Adam, you might not even be there, or we might not be there. So we need accountability now, and we want you to be a voice that strengthens C12. My second point is about an independent oversight committee, independent being the operative word, and science at the center of climate planning. Again, we cheered a week ago when we heard about the advisory body, an illustrious group of well-respected citizens, but one scientist. We're very concerned that scientists are the ones to set the targets. They're the ones to evaluate progress. They're the ones that we have to count on, because negotiating with science isn't something we can do. We are trying it with COVID, not that effectively. So scientists have to be right there. And so when we saw just one scientist, we went, oh my goodness, because the climate crisis is here. We can't afford weak legislation. I know you know it. And we need to strengthen C12. And this is an opportune time to have it reflect the urgency of life-saving for us, life-saving the planet. It's a life-saving mission for all of us. Your kids, grandkids are going to thank you. So I'd like to just introduce Michelle Tom. She's our political action chair, and she's going to give you a little slideshow.
Hi, Adam. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too, Michelle.
So, and thank you for being a big supporter of GASP with our Twitter account. We appreciate that.
Of course. I should spend less time on Twitter. Maybe we all should, but
Me too.
yeah.
So everybody, is my screen showing properly or is it weird?
Yes.
Okay, I'll get started. So this week, our gas group hosted a webinar with over 100 viewers on C12 and the climate emergency with Seth Klein. Adam, I think you're going to be receiving a copy of the book, as Seth noted on Twitter that one Ontario woman just bought a copy for each of the 338 MPs in Parliament. Seth sets out 4 markers in his book to know if we are really in an emergency, like we were in World War II. He comments that when we were in it, that World War II emergency, we didn't know if we would win. And we didn't even have everyone in Canada on our own side, just like today with our climate emergency. We didn't at that time even have our neighbors to the south in the US. So how do we know we're in an emergency? Well, number 1 marker, Seth says, we spend what it takes to win. And it was useful. And one of the reasons we won World War II was Canada spent over 100% of its debt to GDP ratio in that war. And it's good to know that we're currently spending 47% of our debt to GDP ratio on COVID. Modern monetary makes sense. Biden, though, has just announced that he will be spending what would be equivalent in Canada to 50 US billion per year. It's a $500 billion in the US, but they have a 10 times bigger economy on climate and green infrastructure. Now, it's good to know that we are spending $5 billion a week on COVID with government securities, and we should be doing that. But we're only spending $5 billion per year on climate. Again, Biden is proposing 50 billion Canadian per year if it was economy of our size, and they're facing COVID too. Number 2, what else do we need in an emergency? Well, we would be creating new economic institutions to get the job done. And in World War II, 28 new Crown Corps were created in a 6-year span. And following World War II, we had a fantastic, thriving economy after World War II. Since the Liberals have come to power, we've invested in 2 Crown Corps, one being our Trans Mountain Pipeline, and the other being the Canada Infrastructure Bank, which we know is a vehicle for privatizing infrastructure. With COVID, money is flowing through the Bank of Canada very effectively. We worry that the Canada Infrastructure Bank will be slower and more cumbersome. And we know that the revenues are going to stream through to private enterprise, not to our public coffers, which we'd like it to. Number 3, what else do we need if we are really in an emergency? Well, in World War II, there was a shift from voluntary to mandatory measures. And if we look at this graph and we look at the emission levels since 2020, we've really flatlined. And why is that? Well, a major reason is that actions taken to date have been almost entirely voluntary. We encourage change, we incentivize change, we offer rebates, we send price signals. But what we have decidedly not done is require change. For example, we should declare that it will no longer be legal to sell new fossil fuel burning vehicles as of 2025. We should be mandating that all new vehicles will not be permitted to use natural gas or other fossil fuels for heating as of next year. The City of Vancouver's done that for next year. They're getting serious about creating mandatory measures. We should be banning advertising for fossil fuel vehicle makers and gas stations like we once did around cigarette ads. That's how we make clear that this is serious. And our 4th major point that Seth talks about is we need to tell the truth about the severity of the crisis and communicate a sense of urgency about the measures necessary to combat it. We know that the Liberal government has done an excellent daily press briefings during our pandemic, but we don't see this consistency and coherence with the climate emergency from government or from our CBC. In another meeting that we've had with another MP, we were told that Minister Wilkinson has kept the 2030 target because in his wisdom, he sees it as reasonable and achievable. It well may be true that a 2030 target based on what's out there is achievable, but we are in an emergency. The time for reasonableness or incrementalism is not what's needed right now. We need a communication of the urgency of this issue, and we need targets and timelines that reflect that urgent situation. Per capita, you know this, Canadians are leading the G7 in greenhouse gas emissions. Just on Tuesday, Lacar, who is chair of France's Climate Council, has said that Canada was the only country out of 64 who had growth in emissions from 2016 to 2019, and was the only of the G7 with that kind of growth. We need a 2025 target, and she says it as well. That's what Canada needs to do. We're in a climate emergency, and we can do this. The public, Adam, in your riding is behind you, and Canadians across the country. Seth did a Abacus poll throughout all of Canada. Canadians are behind you. Please take these bold ideas back to caucus. Tell them that this is what we want in Canada. We see you as a progressive within the Liberal Party who can tell the Liberal cabinet and the caucus that we are ready to give climate crisis the urgency it needs. The Liberals have done this with COVID, with CERB and wage subsidies. Let's please show that boldness with C12. And I want to pass it over to Marcia, who's the chair of the Sustainable Milton and a wonderful person who's a constituent in your riding.
Hello, Adam. So my background is in environmental science. So I worked at the federal level. I worked at Environment Canada previously. And the targets that we have, like getting to 2030 and setting that first reporting at 2030, not only is it's sending a message basically from your government that it's not an emergency to you, right? You guys have your platform based on like your climate promises, but pushing off the reporting to the next administration is just kind of passing the buck in our eyes. Now, the science says that there's uncertainty around our targets as well. So 2050, having that as our net zero target, there's a lot of geophysical uncertainty that we may need to actually like change that by 15 to 20 years. So we have approximately, there's an error of 15 to 20 years for reaching that net neutrality. So that carbon neutrality. So the 5-year milestones are great, but we want to see your government be the first one. If you're putting this bold climate plan in place, we want to see your government to be the first one to report back to Canadians. Hey, thanks. I'm just going to pass it back to Michelle.
Sorry, guys. I put on mute so you wouldn't hear my clicking and tapping as I'm going through your unmuting and everything. But let me know when it's my turn to respond and ask a few questions.
It is your turn.
Okay, cool. Well, I'm excited.
The 2025, Adam?
Yeah, I'm also I asked the same question. Okay, when we had a caucus meeting, everybody was asking the same questions. Why not 2025? And I don't think that my answers are going to satisfy you, but I can tell you exactly what I got back. And I'll tell you that some of them were heartening, because what I asked was, why is there nothing? And what I got back was, well, there is not nothing, there's something. And I can explain a little bit, and maybe you've heard it, but maybe not, about what exists between now and 2030. And it's kind of a lot, to be honest. It was more than I anticipated. And yeah, like you, I wasn't necessarily satisfied, but I was heartened by what I heard. So a 2030 progress report needs to be tabled by the end of 2027. That's a good thing. There needs to be an annual report detailing how the federal government is managing the financial risks of climate change and the opportunities. There needs to be a review by the Commissioner of the Environment and Sustainable Development within 5 years of coming into force of this act. So if this happens in 2021, which would be great, hopefully revised, as you said, then that would be 2026. There is a legally binding process for the federal government to set climate targets and and bring forward ambitious plans for every 5 years after 2030. But 2030 was explained to me as sort of the global standard for that first hard and fast target. In addition to that, there's a couple more little things I got on another slide. As it was explained to me, there's more than one route to get to 2030. We don't know if it's going to be like slow and steady. We don't know if it's going to be like fast at the start in a curve like this, or like, you know, sort of a strong finish towards the end. But we do know that it's a mandatory finish line that we must cross in 2030, and we have to demonstrate progress between now and then. I agree that this is a good step forward, but not enough. It doesn't satisfy me, but you guys know, I've mentioned this to you a number of times, that I got involved to make my party bolder, greener, more ambitious, and to set tougher targets. And there's a large group of us in my party that believe in that. And there's a very, very small group that doesn't, to be honest. I think it's a very progressive group of people that are demanding aggressive action. And we're working hard on this. You're not the first environmental group that I've met with that has very clearly articulated what you would like to see. And it's not the first time that I'm going to take that back and say I've met with another group that also wants to see this.
Adam, Adam, I just want to tell you about GASP, just to give you, is 80 to 85 grandmothers. None of us, just so you know, none of us are experts or scientists. Well, some of us are, but we're talking general public. So I just want to tell you, when you say environmental groups are speaking, you know what? Some of us ordinary people are speaking.
But I'll be honest. Most of the groups that I meet with, you know, are citizens. They're citizen action groups that really care about something. And, you know, that varies from people that care about physical activity for youth to ending the live horse export to slaughter. You know, like these, very, very few of them are academics or experts in their fields. And the vast majority of the people that I spend time with on Zoom these days are environmental groups. And then sometimes somebody from like a government relations agency that is putting an organization or a person in touch with an MP. So rest assured that that's consistent. And I'm also not a scientist. I mean, I have a science degree, but that doesn't make me a scientist. I'm certainly not an expert on the environment, or even, okay, maybe I'm an expert on kinesiology. I went to 7 Olympic Games. Maybe I can consider myself an expert on human movement, but still, there's always somebody smarter. But so back to C12 for a minute. I agree that it's, you know, I don't know how to describe it. Like I said, kind of heartening, but not perfect. It's not like something that, you know, I think is finished by any stretch of the imagination. I think, you know, if I can speak openly, despite the fact that I'm being recorded, it's likely that it's not going to get any support from the Conservatives, but it is likely that it's going to get some support with amendments from the Green Party and the NDP. So that'll probably drag it in the right direction, as far as I'm concerned. Yeah, Michelle.
Oh, I'll say something quickly, and then if it would be okay, I want to make sure Linda and others had a chance to talk, because I felt like I got my turn. But Dan Albus, who's the environment critic for the Conservatives, is happy with C12, and that worries me, because that tells me that it's obviously weak as it stands now, because the Conservatives are lacking ambition, and a lot of them are climate deniers. And if C12 goes through without significant amendments, that's very telling of what that legislation looks at like right this minute. But I'm wondering if I can let Linda say something.
Michelle, if I could speak to that for just a second. Sure. Not all Conservatives are climate deniers, and
some are. And I wouldn't say Dan is, but some are.
Dan's not, and Dan's. Yeah. You know, Dan's one of the good guys, to be honest. He's annoying, but he's good. I know, He's like Michael Chong. You know, he believes in climate science. He believes in climate change, and he knows that it's an emergency. But he's got to fight against people like Philip Lawrence, who's my girlfriend's parents' MP, who doesn't believe that he thinks, you know, carbon is plant food, and that just makes my skin crawl. But I'm glad I don't have to share a party with people like that. Anyway, over to Linda. I want to hear from Linda.
I don't have a lot of expert advice to give you, but I just want you to know, Adam, that for the first time since I've been involved with this group and concerned about what's happening to our environment and the future for my grandchildren, I am discouraged I am really down. I feel that we're not doing enough. The fact that this has been delayed to 2030 is really upsetting me. I can't tell you enough. I just feel from everything that I've been researching in the last little while, because I'm involved with pension investments and the banks, our dirty banks in the world, and where we stand with the G7 and what's been happening here, I'm really discouraged. It's not enough. It's just simply not enough. We have to go faster. There's no question for me. And I just had to tell you that. I'm sorry if that's an emotional statement, but that's the way I'm feeling.
Well, there's nothing wrong with being emotional, and the climate crisis is a very emotional topic, but not just for grandmothers. It's also very emotional for young people. I have a really active youth council here in Milton, and it's crazy. I don't want to say it's crazy to say, it's a bad choice of words. It's remarkable to say how connected mental health and anxiety is with the climate crisis for people of all ages, particularly young people, because there's a lot of uncertainty. You know, there's a lot of uncertainty that they don't remember what weather was like in weather and climate are two different things, but they don't have necessarily the same, like, you know, perspective as adults and older adults do. They just hear that, they feel that people aren't listening.
Yeah,
So
I've been working with young people from around the
I know.
province recently through SHIFT on pensions and the Ontario Teachers Pension Fund in particular. And these young people are really concerned, and they made an excellent video encouraging their teachers to question their pension fund and its investments in fossil fuels, and to make changes there. So I know what you're talking about, Adam. I know they're concerned, and I am so impressed with their knowledge and what they're trying to do.
Yeah. Well, let's call progress what it is. Okay, this is an important step that I think we need to take forward, and I would like to see this bill strengthened. But also, I would insist that we recognize that there's not nothing between now and 2030 in this bill. There are accountability measures baked into it. I agree it's not enough, but it's not like we're not looking at the thermometer once between now and 2030. And I'm not trying to apologize for Jonathan Wilkinson, but in my reading of the bill and in my reading of the bill kit, it's evident that they've indicated that it's important to be accountable between now and 2030. And if that's true, then why not set a target? I mean, I can kind of draw. This is the thing that I have in my head. If I could grab a piece of paper, you know, if there's a graph here and we've got 2030 at the end, and now, and we've got a target, and this is where we are. There are like so many ways to achieve the same thing. Do you know what I mean? Like sorry, I'm a graph person. You don't know if it's going to be like this graph or a this graph or a slow and steady decline, right? And I think that's kind of the reason why they might be reticent to set a 2025 target, because frankly, we don't even really know where this bill is going to be at in 2025. The legislative process is agonizingly slow, but I'm pushing for it. You can count on me to be asking those questions and to be saying, hey, shouldn't we be being more ambitious? The people that I've met with, nobody has called me and said, hey, this is a great bill, by the way. You know, nobody has set a meeting with me and gone, wow, C12, like just nail on the head. But I do think it's an important step forward. And I do think that, you know, it's what we need to be focused on. And I'm glad that we have a government that is at least, you know, agreeing that this is an emergency and a crisis, and I will accept that it's not satisfying many of the groups that are emblematic of yours. Yeah, Kim.
Thanks, Adam. So I'm just going to take Seth Klein's view and say, so if it was World War II and we took 5 to 10 years to decide to do something and decide what curve we were going to do, we'd all be Germans now. So we don't have that kind of time, Adam. We can't allow this to continue. We need to move faster. It just has to be. The other thing I'd like to point out is that the fact that there isn't an independent body that is monitoring or reporting on this, that it is going through the government, is a very dangerous path to be taking. It's not going to get us where we need to go either.
And Lorraine was going to
Yes.
say something too.
Yes, thanks, Michelle. I'm kind of sharing the same feelings that Linda has already expressed. Most people will know me as somebody who's usually very upbeat, but in the last couple of weeks, all I've been reading are horrific reports pointing out Canada's deficiencies on climate emissions. And it's report after report that is very depressing. It's clearer than ever that the climate crisis in Canada has never been treated like the crisis that it really is. And we're running out of time. As Carol mentioned, we're in gas, we are over 80 members, and we're really, really concerned for the future that our children, our grandchildren, and in my case, great-grandchildren are going to inherit. Because from when I look at C12, yes, it's a great start, but there's no teeth in it. And all these excuses about 2030, they're just unacceptable. And my hope is waning. I've always supported the Liberals. I've worked on Liberal campaigns all my life, but my hope is really going out the door if I don't see substantial, really, really good targets and accountability in this bill. That's really all I have to say at the moment. Thank you for this time.
Mhm. Again, I really don't want to make excuses. It's not why I wanted to take this call. But I would say that a 2025 target, while important and very valuable and emblematic of progress, more progress in the right direction, wouldn't change the benchmark of 2030. It would make it more ambitious. It would make it more likely, perhaps. But 2030 is 2030, and that's where it's basically what I've been told is that the target of 2030 remains the same. It remains ambitious regardless of the path that we're taking to get there.
But Art,
Sorry?
Marcia,
I just wanted to take a minute to say, although I appreciate the shape of the graphs that you've given, it does make a difference from a climate perspective, whether those emissions are decreasing earlier on in the decade versus all at once later on, right?
Totally.
It makes a difference with regards to how much funding we're going to pay to make those reductions, and it makes a difference like health-wise. So, I mean, once these things are done, once things like sea ice melts, you're not getting that back, right? And those kind of processes will speed up the whole climate process, right?
accelerating.
So it will accelerate it.
Yeah.
Right. So
No, yeah, and
So-
that's precisely the message
Right,
that we
so,
said is,
I like the explanation that you guys were giving, but it's not valid in the sense that it meshes with the climate science, right? It's not aligning with what the scientists are saying.
well, it's aligning with what some of the scientists are saying with respect to the path to 2030 and the path to 2050. And that's the challenge is that we don't know exactly how we're going to get there at this moment. But like I said, I'm not here to make excuses, and I've got some lines that I have read from the department as to whether or why not this and why not that. Those answers aren't necessarily adequate. They're not shutting me up. I'm still speaking up. I'm still asking. Well, I still think they should be there. And, it frustrates me that instead of working towards best case scenario, we're always trying to stave off the worst case scenario. And that's just politics in general in Canada, right? Like constantly trying to stave off the worst case scenario.
Can I interject on that point?
Sure.
I would say that would be the truth, except that we're in a minority government position and you have NDP, Bloc, and Green Party people that are willing to work with you to be ambitious. You don't need the cooperation of the Conservatives in this. So I just want to make that friendly point to you that I think that could happen. The Bloc I'm not happy about the Bloc in many ways, but on climate, they're pretty decent. And we know the NDP and Greens with Bill C-232, and the Greens are always on board with things. I just want to make that point. And Michelle has a question, as if you don't mind, Adam, and then we could get into just kind of a general discussion. Michelle?
Hi, Adam.
Hi.
I hope you're doing well this morning. My question, and it's kind of a pivot, but it goes back a little bit to Bill C-12, is that how is this bill reflecting, and this is coming from someone who's lived a decade up in the Arctic and is well versed in Indigenous relations, how does this bill reflect Canada's commitment to enacting the UNDRIP, and how will it include means by which Indigenous people can be full participants in climate action? So that was my question. And then a follow-up kind of related is because the bill C-12 is a climate accountability legislation, or form of it too. How does it make the connection with a just transition, which was one of the campaign promises? So that's kind of where I'm going with this, and wanting to kind of get clarification. And if there are gaps that can be identified, is that something you can bring back to the caucus?
Thanks, Michelle. Really, really good questions. And a just transition is tied directly to Indigenous economic mobility. And that's one of the challenges, is that I'm on the Indigenous Northern Affairs Committee, so I meet with Indigenous groups, NIOs, stakeholders, people individually all the time, twice a week for 2 hours and throughout my week. And part of that, first of all, I'm going to be very, very reticent to frame an Indigenous perspective as homogenous. It's anything but.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, there are 3 different subcategories of Indigenous people in Canada, and then those can be divided up a million times too. And then these people are all individuals with individual proclivities and preoccupations and concerns and issues and political leanings. And sometimes, as white people, mostly we let's just say settlers, we homogenize other people's views, and that's something that I'm very, very reticent to do. So I won't. But I will say that I've heard from Indigenous people who want to drill for oil in the Arctic because of the upward economic mobility that would bring to their community. So it's not a simple answer. UNDRIP is very, very important to me. I think that if I am part of a government that brings UNDRIP forward and passes it into law in Canada, that'll be the most significant thing that I do as a politician, to be very honest with you. It's about human rights. It's about basic human rights. And I'm very, very seized on it. And my colleague Gary and Sangri is too, and I'm working very closely with him. And we just actually we just brought forward a motion through an INN to get it on the legislative. To be honest, I had not considered exactly how UNDRIP and C-12 dovetail, except that there's Indigenous groups that are, heartened by C-12, and there are ones that are more aligned with oil and gas and more aligned with the conservative mentality that Canada has no role to play in the climate crisis.
So to add to that, you're absolutely right, and it's not a homogenous worldview that we're trying to advocate for in terms of Indigenous relations, for sure. But it goes back to what I think Michelle was saying earlier, that you have friends in other political parties that might be willing to work with you on this. So I take the example of someone like Romeo Saganesh, who is the NDP, who is actually I was one of his constituents at one point. So he is someone who would be willing to talk about this kind of stuff. I know he's very active on the UBI front as well. So what I'm trying to say here is that there's an opportunity here that this bill could be reflective of, and I just want to see if there's something you can push for as well.
Mm-hmm. Well, Romeo will be one of our next witnesses on the Indigenous and Northern Affairs Committee. And he, the constituency. So you lived in Nunavik?
Yes, I did.
Yeah.
And I worked in Nunavut as well.
Oh, amazing. I've been to both Nunavik and Nunavut. It's a life-changing experience for sure. And and all over. It was a thrill for me because my experience in a kayak as a settler person in Canada went before all of my appreciation for people of the North, and it was important for me to connect and to learn a little bit more of the heritage of the boat that I used for so long to explore the world. So Romeo is, of course, if without Romeo, there wouldn't be UNDRIP in Canada. We probably wouldn't be talking about it. And he was the progenitor of that. Big fan. I'm a big fan of Romeo. I saw somebody just brought up Leah Gazan's bill as well. Also a big fan of Leah. We're in the same class, so we both started as politicians at the same time, or I should say as federal politicians, because I think she was involved in municipal politics first. But so Romeo will be helping, which is great. You're right. We do have the NDP support on UNDRIP. We can't count on, again, I'm speaking frankly, so I hope that this recording isn't taken out of context or abused. I don't think we can count on the Bloc for anything right now. They've been so unsupportive of our government, and that's fine. That's where they want to be. That's their prerogative. But even on things of mutual interest and mutual ambition and goals that we both set as parties. So it's hard to know when you can count on your colleagues. It's very challenging. I thought we'd be a little bit more collaborative, to be honest, on both sides. And all I can promise is that I wanted to. I've got a meeting at 10, and I just got a couple of messages that I'm late, so I have to go soon. But I wanted to talk about local stuff a little bit because we just secured a little bit of circuitous funding for Sustainable Milton, and I think it will continue. We've also got a funding program that will close in the next week for a program called the Healthy Communities Initiative, and that's an opportunity to apply for some funding. We got funding for Sustainable Milton actually through the New Horizons for Seniors grant program. So, I mean, anytime there's money available for any of the organizations that you guys work for, please get in touch with my office because we want to support your applications, because we want to support good local work. Of course, this is a call that's more of a national scope. We're talking about legislation and everything, but the local action is really important to me as well. And Sustainable Milton's doing extraordinary work locally, so don't want to ignore that, and I want to continue to support it. So if you would like a little bit of information on the Healthy Communities Initiative, then you can Google Healthy Communities Initiative, and you can email me or send me a message on social media, and we'll try to get a package together for next
Thanks,
week.
Adam. We'll put someone in touch with you that is working on that. That's great.
I'll,
Thank you very much.
I'll probably contact you directly then.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
Well, you guys have my email address. If
Yeah.
you send me one in today's a good day to send me an email. For some reason, my afternoon's pretty open, so I'll be able to respond personally.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Thanks, Marcia. Thanks, Michelle. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you very much. We're very
Anytime.
pleased that we got this time with you. And
Next time, let's book an hour, okay? Let's
Yes.
insist next time.
it may be sooner than you think.
That's fine. That's fine. If you have good recommendations, if you have ideas for me, then hit me up in the meantime.
And
I'm
you
sorry that
too.
I've got to hop off.
And you too, Adam, if you have ideas for us as, general advocates, we're looking for ideas all the time. Thank
You're
you.
doing a great job.
Next. Okay.
That book is on Audible if you want to listen to it at some point. It's
Oh.
awesome.
Great
So
idea.
happy International Women's Day, Adam. Thank you for your support there.
We're almost there. Yeah, coming up
Almost there.
soon. I think I sent CFEW my photo. I think Kufsa did, but I can send another one if that's what you need. But let me know.
We'd love for you to read The Good War by Seth Klein and see how we've done this before. We can do it again.
I love it. Okay. Well, I'll look forward to my copy, or Kim's suggesting that I get the audiobook, and I'll do both.
Thank you so much.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Take
Thanks,
care.
everybody. It was nice to see you. Take
Bye.
care.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
And please, sorry, before we go,
Oh.
if you have friends or family or colleagues or neighbors who aren't tech savvy and who are over 80, please help them schedule their vaccine.
Right.
Thanks, everybody.
Good point.
Okay,
Thanks.
bye.
Bye.
Well,
Oh, disappointing.
Amendments. He was trying to sell it as it is.